this will get fun.
Do we not like sitting on the right side of the room?
Yeah.
Nope.
Thanks. Yes, there's water in the cooler.
Thank you.
Our hero, Engineer Pat.
This dude's gonna go far. This dude's gonna go far.
He likes, I tell you, he likes his street. He loves his street.
Sir, are you here for the class or are you just?
Didn't like it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faith Watt, and I am the Chief of Staff here for the Marlin Prestige Business Conference. Before we get started with Pat's presentation, I just wanted to make a couple announcements. In case you were unaware, we do have an event app. It's part of the Event-Based app, so you would download the Event-Based app, select conference, and you can search by either Marlin Prestige or Virginia Beach. You'll get our full schedule as well as speaker bios, judges bios, things like that. So please check it out. We also have a Snapchat filter, so if you guys would like to take pictures, especially with Pat, and use our Snapchat filter, we would greatly appreciate it. We also have a live stream on our Facebook page, so if you cannot make an event but you would like to watch it, you can watch from the Facebook. If there's a question portion, we will be monitoring it, so if you have a question, we can get it that way. We do encourage you to stay after Pat's presentation. We do have Shark Tank presentations, and then the MD202 class with Zachary is going to do some podcasts, and then there is the internship gala tonight after 7 o'clock. It would be a good network experience for all of you, so if you could please come out. We still have another full day of events tomorrow and on Friday, so please come out. And
good afternoon, everyone. My name is Austin McKenzie. I'm the social media manager for the 2018 Spring Conference. Today I have the privilege of introducing Mr. Pat Settle, or some of you may know him as Engineer Pat. Pat is a public relations correspondent in the Marlin's Prestige Business Conference. He is well known around Virginia Wesleyan University for being one of the best all-around people. Pat would give the shirt off his back for anybody if they needed it, and you'll never see Pat without a smile on his face. He's a junior who is majoring in business and minoring in communications. Pat spends some of his spare time photographing and filming trains coming through the Hampton Roads area. Out of all the railroads, his favorite railroad is Norfolk Southern. Let's give a warm Virginia Wesleyan welcome to our guest speaker this afternoon, Mr. Pat Settle.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie, for the fine introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, guests, faculty, and fellow guests. My name is Pat Settle, and I'm the Public Relations Correspondent for this spring's conference, as Mr. McKenzie mentioned just a minute ago. Today, I'm here to speak with you about how railroads impact the U.S. and the world. A common question is, what do our railroads do? They are a vital part of our economy, which they move bulk materials and large amounts of merchandise from state to state, coast to coast, and country to country. There was one event that sparked this idea, which was the Transcontinental Railroad, which was completed on May 10, 1869, where the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific met in Promontory, Utah. And May 10th is National Train Day to celebrate this historic event, and this picture below is the most famous photo. When we see different trains, we see different types of cars that call specific cargo. Some of the cars we will talk about today are boxcars, reefers or refrigerator cars, coal hoppers, covered hoppers, gondolas, tank cars, container cars, flat cars, auto racks, and of course the caboose. Let's take a look at all of them. What pulls the train? Big engines like these below. We have Norfolk Southern 4055, which is actually a rebuilt engine. It was originally built by General Electric in March of '95 in Erie plant. This locomotive was rebuilt by Norfolk Southern's Altoona Works on March of this past year. They actually updated the electrical system and put on a brand new wide cab for safety concerns. On the right is a CSX Electromotive Division locomotive that was produced in 1980 for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. The Norfolk Southern engine has 4,400 horsepower, and the CSX engine has 3,000 horsepower. They are used to haul long trains from place to place. Boxcars and reefers, these two are very common cars here. We have boxcars that carry general merchandise that needs to be kept dry, like typing paper, computers and televisions that we have in our homes, and of course, auto parts for your car. And a refrigerator car is used to haul refrigerated goods, including juice, meat, cheese, and potatoes that you would find in a normal grocery store. One prime example is Tropicana. CSX has a contract with Tropicana to move orange juice from Jacksonville, Florida to New Jersey, and the southbound runs go from New Jersey back to Jacksonville to get loaded with juice again. Coal hoppers, this is a common car that we see hauling coal. Sometimes you see them haul sand, gravel, and stone. Here we see a hopper that's on an eastbound coal train that was taken on its way to Pier 6. Covered hoppers, most people call them grain cars. They are used to keep grains and fertilizers dry from the elements. This type of car transports different types of grain, fertilizers, and sugar. This Seaboard Coastline grain hopper, as you see here, was on CSX Train ID Q410 in Petersburg, and it was bound for Selkirk, New York. Gondolas, there are two different types of gondolas. We have the most common one, which is a regular gondola, which is used to haul exposed loads, including steel coils, pipe, and also scrap metal. And some gondolas dump on either side, like the one below belongs to CSX. That car right below has a load of ballast that is used under the track, and the gondola is powered by the locomotive's power, which is used to dump on one side. And these are used on MOW trains or maintenance of way crews, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Tank cars, a common question is, do they haul flammable liquids? They do. It is a growing business for the railroad. They haul different types of fossil fuels, including gasoline, propane, crude oil, and petroleum gas. And there will usually be a sign on the bottom right-hand corner where the laser is. It will tell you what that tanker car is carrying, like 1993 is diesel, 1987 is regular gasoline that we use to fuel our cars, and 1093 is propane. Flat cars, another type of car that we see a lot. They're used to haul oversized and exposed loads. And I have two examples here. We have new sections of track and also trash dumpsters. Let me talk about the trash for a minute. According to what I've heard recently, that the landfills up north are full and they cannot hold all that trash. So CSX, in this case, brings the loads south to Petersburg, where they interchange with Norfolk Southern, and they take them to Wakefield to the dump, and they bring the empties back to CSX. The new sections of track here, all this was bound for New York. And see here, this is a concrete tie. It is one of the newest railroad ties that's out there. It's different from the traditional wood tie. The wood tie will last about 10 years, whereas the concrete tie will last about 25 years. Another type of flat car is a bulkhead flat car. It serves the same purpose by carrying oversized and exposed loads. The only difference between the traditional flat car and the bulkhead flat car, it has two raised sides to prevent the load from shifting forwards and backwards. And they're used to carry like sewer pipes and rebar, as we see here in the picture. And this was bound to New York again. Container cars, we see a lot of them here because of the ports, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Our container cars transport containers from coast to coast with up to 3 containers in each car. Since the containers are stacked on top of each other, they're all held together by a pin in all 4 corners to keep the loads from shifting and falling off. Spine cars, another type of intermodal car that is used to haul containers and truck trailers. As you can see here, there's some piggyback trailers here. They're taking more trucks off of our highway, and they're bound to the nearest ports in the Pennsylvania area. Auto racks. What else can be carried by train? Cars can be transported by train as well in one of these cars. It's called an automobile car, or simply an auto rack. These cars have about can hold about 12 automobiles per car with 2 levels. They unload on each side, and these cars actually take your new automobiles to the distribution points all across the U.S. Here in the next slide, I have an automotive plant distribution point that's here in the area. It is in the Petersburg area. It is served by Norfolk Southern every day. It's right off of Crater Road in Petersburg. This is where the inbound containers come in from Louisville, and they get dropped off here where the staff over there will unload the cars and they will load them onto trucks to get them to the nearest dealerships. And once they're emptied, another intermodal train will come west after it is put together at NIT. He will come west and pick up the cars and will take them back to Louisville. Before I talk about the Caboose, a common question is asked, have the railroads changed? Yes, they have, but they haven't changed that much. But one car you do not see anymore is a little Caboose. The Caboose was the last car of every freight train. The brakeman and the flagman were in the locomotive, and it was their home away from home. And their responsibility was to check the train for defects, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And of course, with the advancements of technology, these jobs have been done away with. And I do a little video here on explaining on the life of the Caboose, and following that, I will do a follow-up explanation.
All right, everyone, we are now inside this Norfolk and Western Caboose that is on display here at the Southern train station. And as you can see, this is where the crew used to be. Right here is where one of the men would actually do their paperwork. They used to be on this desk, and they put it right here in this drop box. And of course, we have a furnace to keep them warm in the wintertime. The head, of course, and a nice refrigerator. That's where they used to keep everything cold. Got a stove to cook the food, and of course, a sink to wash their hands. This was like the home away from home, hotel on wheels. And as you can see, this is where they would sit, and the purpose of this window, I'll sit out here so you guys can take a look. This is a bay window Caboose, which means the window is on the side of the car. And from this angle, you can actually see the whole train from this side of the Caboose, and inspecting that side for hot axles, which means a wheel that's not turning, or of something else that may fall or may break. So this is the view that he got. And on the other side, it's the same thing. And of course, you had another man do the same thing. So this took the place of 2 or 3 jobs, and technology has taken over that. And that's why you don't see Cabooses on long distance freight trains anymore. But now for local freight trains, you still see a Caboose from time to time. Now if we come out here, I'm going to walk down for a minute. Now here is the coupler of the train. This is a coupler. This is what joins the cars and the locomotives together. This is a big knuckle coupler. And right here is the most important. It's the most important hose on the whole train. This is the air hose. This is the air hose here. What it does is it hooks together after the cars are hooked together. The brakeman will hook it up to the engine or however it's going to be moved. And the locomotive has an air compressor. And when he releases his brakes, the air flows from the locomotive and all the freight cars, including the Caboose. So if this air hose is not connected, that car's not going to air pressure, it's not going to give it the command to stop. So here's the deck right here where you look out onto the train. And also up here they have holes where the flags would go in case the train had to stop. And there's a blue flag under this, means the blue flag protection, which means somebody is under the train working. And here are the facts on the Caboose. I should have done this in my previous part, but this Caboose was built in July of 1962 for the Nickel Plate Railroad. And of course, Norfolk and Western bought them out, I think in '64. The trucks on the Caboose were built in February of '62. And this Caboose was just recently repainted. And it looks really pretty, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of coverage of the Caboose. It's very, very nice. It's very, very nice. And up here, the other side is about the same, but I did not show you.
Thank you. As you can clearly see in this video that the Caboose was actually a vital part of the train. The men worked from the back and inspecting the train from the back to the front because the engineer and the conductor cannot see what goes on in the back. These were like the guys that just followed from the back to make sure everything was all right, and that was their job. But like I just mentioned, the Caboose has been less relied on. I'll get to the next point in a minute. But Norfolk Southern still uses a few cabooses around local jobs as shoving platforms. What has replaced the caboose? The caboose has been less relied on for like the past 40 years. New devices called defect detectors have been installed along the track to find defects. What is a defect detector? A defect detector is a small device that is used on the main track to detect for defects, including dragging equipment, a hot axle, like I mentioned earlier, meaning a wheel that does not turn, and also gives the axle count. The railroad started using these devices in the 1950s, but they did not progress the use of them until the late 80s. The days of the caboose disappeared very quickly. To figure out the number of cars based on the axle count, divide the axle number by 4 to get the number of cars. A computer program is installed on all defect detectors, which they broadcast temperature, how hot or cold it is outside, the axle count, the milepost number, the length of the train, hot axles, and dragging equipment. Next, I have a few samples of them, each of them broadcasting a little something different. We're going to start with the Delaware Hudson defect detector, which is one of my favorites out of all 4 of these. And in fact, this defect detector was just recently replaced.
BNH detector, mileage 173.3, checking southward train. Temperature 60 degrees, axle count 342. No defects. Have a safe day. Transmission over. 6 no detector.
As you heard from that defect detector, he gave him the milepost number, the direction he was going, the temperature, and the axle count. And what he means by no defects means the train looks good by the defect detector. So next we'll hear a local CSX defect detector, the milepost 17.4, which is on the CSX A line. And this was recorded by a buddy of mine, and this defect detector has been replaced.
CSX. Equipment defect detector, milepost 17.4.
That means the train just entered the defect detector, and once he gets out, it'll give the report.
Equipment defect detector, milepost 17.4. No defect. Total axle 5.6. Temperature 3.8 degrees. End of transmission.
And see, with that defect detector, he actually gave him the axle count and the temperature, and had 56 axles. That's about the axle count for an Amtrak train. This one here is an NS defect detector. It will also detect 3 different hot boxes. Take a close listen.
NS detector. First hot box, west side, axle 2, 1. Second hot box, west side, axle 2, 2. Third hot box, west side, axle 2, 3. Total axle count 118. Train speed 2, 7. 10.
All right, you heard in that defect detector, he had 3 hot axles, 3 wheels that weren't turning on the west side, and the defect detector will name each one of them. And once that happens, they have to stop the train to fix the problem. And now the last one is the correct CSX computer system that is used.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector, milepost 420.8. CSX Equipment Defect Detector, milepost 420.8. No defects. No defects. Total axle 260. Train length 5843. End of transmission.
And see, CSX did a little different broadcast. It had the axles and no defects, and it also gave the train length. And sometimes the defect detectors will broadcast the speed of the train. After what we've seen so far, are railroads more efficient than trucks? The answer is yes. Sorry, Dr. Paul. Railroads are more efficient than trucks. they could go from point A to point B on a single gallon of fuel. It is a very efficient method of transportation. An average intermodal freight train will take around 150 trucks off of our highways. What does this mean? That's less congestion on our highway, makes the roads a little bit safer, and we consume and burn less fuel. What are our Class 1 railroads that serve the U.S.? We have several. We have Norfolk Southern, CSX, Amtrak, Union Pacific, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, Canadian National, and Canadian Pacific. Let's look at all of them. Norfolk Southern, my personal favorite, based right here in the Norfolk area, that serves 22 different states, including Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, and Pennsylvania. They carry lots of different cargo, including coal, containers, ethanol products, grain, and export locomotives. Coal is their top commodity, intermodal is the second, and the coal gets exported to foreign countries at Lambert's Point Terminal, which is only about 15 minutes from here. It's a really awesome looking place, and that is known as Pier 6. Here below, I catch a westbound hopper train that's going back to Wellard, Virginia, going back for another load of coal. And this picture was taken about 5 minutes from my house. More on NS, like I just mentioned, the containers are the number 2 commodity. Most of the containers that are bound for NIT come from Chicago, Illinois, Louisville, Kentucky, and Columbus, Ohio. And then they go inbound to Norfolk International Terminal. Here I catch 2 trains. Right below is NS ID 23G with the auto racks behind him bound for the automotive distribution point, like I mentioned earlier. And off to the right is Norfolk Southern ID 236 with NS 7692 passing through Suffolk, bound for Norfolk International Terminal. More on NS, the grain is the number 3 commodity. The grain season occurs during the early fall to midwinter. A prime example is here. According to John Pike, Operations Director of Goldsboro Milling Company in Wayne County, North Carolina, produces 500 million pounds of turkey and pork every single year. 40% of its grain comes from North Carolina farmers, local grain, and 60% of it comes from the Midwest. Every week, 185 NS grain cars, each carrying about 100 tons of grain, roll onto his siding. Given the grain bulk and distance traveled, rail is the cheapest method of transportation. Regular rail deliveries keep stockpiles, storage, and inventory costs low. So big companies like Millsboro Grain, as you can see here, the railroads really help them out because they can carry more grain from one point to the next without having a bunch of trucks on our highway. This is a very efficient method of transportation. Norfolk Southern's competition, CSX. They are the second Class 1 freight railroad that's headquartered in Jacksonville, Florida, and they serve Virginia, Ohio, Illinois, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Maryland, and New York. Containers are the top commodity for the company. Coal is the second. And the containers that are inbound to Portsmouth come from Chicago, Illinois, and Columbus, Ohio. Here I see an intermodal train and also a coal train. On the left we have a local run that's heading back to the terminal with CSX 3059 running backwards. The reason this locomotive is pointed in the backwards direction, this method is called long hood forward. It was a practice used in about the 1950s to about the late 80s. This was a Norfolk and Western and a Southern Railway type running because the back of the train acted as the front and the crew is facing toward the cars. If there was a head-on collision, it would protect the crew from the wreck. It would damage the back of the engine, not the front of it. And on the right, we have a CSX coal train, which is ID CSXT T351, heading south on the CSX A line, known as the Old Atlantic Coast Line, through Petersburg, Virginia last summer. Amtrak. Everybody knows what Amtrak is. Amtrak is America's passenger rail service. Quick show of hands, how many of you have ridden Amtrak? All right, I like that. Amtrak was founded by our U.S. government in 1971 to relieve all railroads from passenger service. Back then, all the freight companies also provided passenger service. A few examples of that are the Santa Fe, the Union Pacific, the Southern Railway, the Pennsylvania Railroad, and many others. Amtrak offers local passenger service in Norfolk, Newport News, Williamsburg, Richmond, and Petersburg. In 2016, Amtrak served 31.3 million passengers and earned $2.2 billion in revenue, and nearly 86,000 passengers ride Amtrak daily. That's a lot of people that are moving every day. Here I see the Norfolk-bound Amtrak train, i.e. Amtrak 02E, or the Norfolk bus, speeding through Suffolk bound for the Norfolk Amtrak station. Union Pacific, one of our companies in the Midwest, was founded in 1865 by our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, and is headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. And they serve the Midwest and western portions of our country, including California, Nebraska, Colorado, Oregon, Wyoming, and Illinois. 21%, or approximately $4.5 billion of their revenue, comes from shipping industrial products. 19%, or approximately $4 billion, accounts for the intermodal traffic. Agriculture products account for 19% of the revenue, or $4 billion. Here I catch a Union Pacific engine here going east to Norfolk on NS train ID V18 manifest out of Crewe, Virginia. UP's competition, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, reporting marks BNSF. They're headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas, and they also serve the Midwest and western portions of the country. In 2017, BNSF's revenue increased by 8%, bringing the total to $21.4 billion. Here I catch two Norfolk Southern trains below, both having BNSF leaders. The way this works is that when Norfolk Southern uses another company's locomotives, they pay for a certain amount of hours that they use them, and Norfolk Southern will pay BNSF for the use of the locomotives, and same for all the other railroads. Canadian National, based in Montreal, Canada. They're one of two major Class 1 freight railroads that serve Canada. They serve the areas of Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, and they also serve parts of North America, including Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Louisiana. CN is the largest railway in Canada in terms of both revenue and physical network. And CN is also Canada's only transcontinental railroad company that spans from the Atlantic coast in Nova Scotia to the Pacific coast in British Columbia. And here a friend of mine sent me this photo of a CN train that led an NS Intermodal a few years back going into Fort Lock Yard, which is the step before they go into NIT. Canadian Pacific Railway, reporting more to CP, based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is on the Pacific coast. They are Canada's second Class 1 freight company. They serve from Montreal to Vancouver, and they also serve parts of North America, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and New York City. Excuse me. Here I catch a CP engine leading NS 814 coal train to Pier 6 off of Military Highway, waiting for a proceed signal for another westbound to come out. Now we talked all about Class 1 freight railroads, but how does our goods get from the Class 1 companies to all of our local businesses? We have Shortline railroads, which is a very small railroad that serves all of our local industries. We have two that serve in our area, which are the Commonwealth Railway and the Norfolk Portsmouth Beltline. Let's look at both of them. The Commonwealth Railway, owned by the Gunnison Wyoming Railroad, which is based in Darien, Connecticut, is a short line railroad that serves Suffolk and Franklin, Virginia, and they partner with CSX and NS in both locations. In Suffolk, they partner with CSX and NS to bring the intermodal containers to Portsmouth, and they also serve a local chemical company about 15 minutes from my house. In Franklin, they serve the International Paper Mill, which is our paper mill in Franklin, and they move the cars around the plant, and they prepare the empty cars to go south on CSX to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Below are a couple of engines that they own, the 517 to the left and 2091 on the right. Both were originally built for the Santa Fe, and fast fact on the 517, it was rebuilt by the Santa Fe from an older passenger locomotive from the 1970s. They modified it for freight service, and it's still running pretty hard. I've seen both of these engines operate. It's a really neat system, and I do know a friend of mine who works for this company. The Norfolk Portsmouth Beltline, known as NPBL, they're based right over in South Norfolk. and they interchange with CSX and NS to distribute the mixed freight to our local businesses. The Norfolk portion Beltline's only service is delivering grain to our businesses, and below are the two engines that they own, the 5259 and 5260. Both were produced by EMD, Electromotive Division, in 1973 for the Penn Central Railroad, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And of course, Norfolk Southern owns a majority of this company, and they do all of their mechanical work and their 90-day inspections. And both NS and CSX Power are present on this line. Now, what are our major terminals in Hampton Roads? We have four. We have Norfolk International Terminal, known as NIT, Portsmouth Marine Terminal, known as PMT, Virginia International Gateway, and of course the Virginia Inland Port. Norfolk International Terminal, only a few minutes from this campus. It's where Norfolk Southern brings all of their container trains in. Here we see the big cranes lifting the containers off the trailer chassis and loading the outbound ships. The cranes that you see below are known as MyJack cranes, which are specifically designed for moving containers from place to place. They also use straddle loaders to move up and down the aisles of containers. CSX has access to the terminal with an agreement with NS. I am proud to say that I have been there through Dr. Yule's supply chain management class. It was my favorite trip out of all of them. I almost said to myself, I did not want to leave, because it's so cool to watch all the cranes moving around every day and how trucks, trains, and ships all work together.
You did say that, Pat.
Thank you. Right across the Elizabeth River is the Portsmouth Marine Terminal, or known as PMT. The CSX container trains come here by access to the Commonwealth Railway, because the Commonwealth has a few miles of track that connect to the port. And NS has access to the terminal. They have two trains that run in and out, and they have an agreement with CSX. Virginia International Gateway, or VIG, is another part of Portsmouth Marine Terminal, and here is an aerial shot of the gateway. The Virginia Inland Port, located in Front Royal, Virginia, handled 60,000 20-foot equivalents in 2008. Norfolk Southern serves this terminal 5 days a week. And as you notice, there's no water at this port. That's why it's called the Virginia Inland Port, and it is trucks and trains specifically. Now, after what we've seen already, here are a few of the trains that I have seen, and pretty much everybody knows here that I'm a rail fan. So here we'll see a CSX train that's coming from Portsmouth going over to Suffolk, and I'll show you guys a little bit about it, and I give facts along the way.
All right, everybody. Here we have CSXT to and from Portsmouth.
Leave it there.
The Commonwealth crew would use the NS power or the CSX power, depending on what train it is, and they will take it to Portsmouth, and they'll bring it right back out and have it ready for the road crew. The road crew, in this case, CSX, and for Norfolk Southern is the road crew for B07 and B14.
Oh, it's buffered.
The car needs to move.